Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Let's get started. So Tatiana and I are thrilled to discuss the topics on the mind of so many candidates applying for an MBA. What are the 5 critical finishing touches that you need to be aware of to hopefully gain admission to your dream business school? We encourage you to plan for and take this final phase seriously to ensure your applications stand out. So maybe you're applying for round 1 in early September, or perhaps you're just building up your knowledge now because you're going to be applying in R2 or later. Either way, you're in the right place. Applying for an MBA is a real journey. It's a moment of intense introspection, and candidates feel a great sense of accomplishment once they've applied. In addition to your full-time job, though, you'll be spending a lot of time of your free time working on the different required material, from your resume to choosing your recommenders, to briefing your recommenders, and of course, writing your essays. Then, of course, you have this final phase, the 5 critical finishing touches. And we're here today to make sure that you take care of that final lap before you press submit. We're going to take you through each of the 5 critical finishing touches, and we're going to start with how the whole application, how to review your whole application. Our objective today is to ensure you take home the gold medal in this critical part of your application process. So Tatiana, over to you now, please.
Thank you, Melissa. Thank you. And thank you, everybody, for joining us. It's really, really great to have you here. And so just as Melissa alluded, I am going to be talking first off about how do we make every single bit and piece, every deliverable in your application tick and tie. And that's a very important review process. And so the questions that you might want to keep in mind as you're going over every single one of the pieces is, is there a common thread? Is there a coherent story that's bringing it all together? Or does it feel like disjointed pieces? It's important that there's harmony, there's equanimity to every single one of the different elements of the application. Also, are you coming across authentically? Does this feel genuine to you? Or does it feel like someone else is being talked about in this package? Throughout the process, very important, have you taken the pulse of the recommenders? After you gave them the brief, after you asked them, after you gave them some guidance, do you know if they're on point, if they're on task? It's important to know that an application, even though all other deliverables might have been submitted, if the letters of recommendation are not submitted along with the rest, meeting the deadline, then the application is not going to be reviewed because it's going to be deemed incomplete. So very important. Take the pulse, stay in touch with recommenders. Also, have you tailored the customizable sections of the application to the school that you're specifically applying to? Certainly, there are pieces that are, you sharing who you are. You have introspected on that, and that's going to be unchangeable regardless of the school that you're applying to. But there are sections in terms of the specifics of the syllabus, the course load, the faculty, the clubs, all these other elements that are customizable to the school is that, represented there. Do you have the right content? Have you distributed and allocated this content properly across all the different bits and pieces, the resume, the essays, the suggested guidance to recommenders? Have they been allocated with the right emphasis? Because sometimes you want to talk about a specific project or instance anecdote more than once so that you can send the message with the right intensity. Are you doing that? All of that is important. Are you addressing the questions properly? Are you truly answering the question as it's being prompted? And then are your responses effectively packaged, elegantly packaged? Are you being economical with your words? Are you being very effective in the way that you are addressing those prompts? Importantly, Have you addressed any gaps? And I'm not going to talk about the bigger gaps, no, that Melissa is going to walk us through kind of on our next piece. But the academic, the professional gaps, no, where you have been out of the professional force, or that there have been some discontinuities in your academic life. Have you addressed them properly? And then finally, are you truly abiding to the school guidelines? And by this, I mean, are you fitting within the word count limit? Are you aligning with the format that is being explicitly requested? And so, like any other guidelines that might be evident, that the school is asking for. And so going back to not the smaller, to some degree gap in terms of the academic or the professional, but the bigger gaps, that as you're doing this end-to-end review, you might find there's a need to explain or elaborate on something. And so to that point, I'm going to pass it to Melissa to tell us about that optional essay.
Thank you. Thank you, Tatiana. Such an important point about reviewing your entire package. So consider leveraging the optional essay. This is something that we like to remind candidates. This is the perfect time to think about it. As you're reviewing all of the different elements of your application, you want to ask yourself, is there something that maybe you haven't had the opportunity to share that's important? It's kind of a tough moment because a lot of candidates are a bit essayed out at this stage. They're so happy, understandably, to have gotten past some of the biggest elements, including their regular essays, that the idea of doing another essay at this stage can seem a little bit daunting. But it's a really important thing to consider because it can really make a big difference in your application. And maybe there's a gap, for example. Maybe you had issues in academically earlier in your career, in your academic career, that require explaining. Maybe you had a couple of tough years in college and there's a good reason and you want to explain that. Maybe there you had an issue with disciplinary action that needs to be explained. You really want to get a sort of holistic view now of your whole application to see, are there things that I have not been able to share appropriately at the level that needs to be shared? Because this is a great opportunity to do so. It might be also that there are gaps, perhaps gaps in your professional experience. Maybe you took a gap year that you haven't had a chance to talk about. And then there's one more case that's a little bit more unusual. But if you are applying to a school and it really is your absolute dream school, has been forever, and there's a very particular reason, or there are several reasons, presumably, why that's the case, this could be an opportunity to share why. Consider it sort of like a love letter to your school, but obviously very backed up. You don't need to use all of the maximum word count for the optional essay, but you do need to take it as seriously as you would any of the other essays. This is not something you want to sort of do last minute without thinking about it, not having it properly proofed, not going through all of the different stages you did with the other essays. But it is something that I think most candidates should consider. Whether or not it's because there was a gap that you need to explain or something else, or because it's an opportunity to share your enthusiasm. So over to you, Tatiana. I think we're going to move to the next slide, which is super important. The application form. This is something people often do, Tatiana, at the very last minute, and then sometimes there's some pretty, bad surprises.
Exactly. No, and thank you so much, Melissa. And of course, these, we're talking about the finishing touches, but this is a recommendation that goes to the beginning, the strategizing of how you're going to proceed with the application. And so get familiar with the application form. Get familiar as soon as you can. Don't just go in to input the recommenders' data and contact info so that they can have the link to submit their recommendation. But get familiar with all the bits and pieces, because even though the application form is mainly kind of a repository of data, there are on occasion embedded mini essays that are asking for very key information that's going to help complete the picture. So, just get familiar with it up front. and then, like that's more a recommendation of beginning of the process. However, towards the end of the process, it's very important, just as you would not show up with a stained shirt to an interview. It's not that the stain is going to make the interviewer think lesser of you intellectually, but it's going to leave a sour taste in their mouth, because you have to take care of details. You need to be well presented and buttoned up. In the same fashion, the application form, we don't want typos. We don't want misspellings. We don't want missing fields. We don't want inconsistent information. And there are a lot of bits and pieces of information going from your different compensation packages throughout your professional life, to all the details of awards or extracurriculars, exactly what role were you playing in that particular club or organization that you were devoting your extra time to. And so this is very important. You need to think that the way that they're going to be interpreting how precise, how careful you are, how much you're focused on detail, and how, where you are, that your reputation is going to precede you, is how promptly and clearly and precisely are you presenting that information. And for that, you need to do it the first time around, trying to input the information as best as you can possibly do it. But you need to go back and you need to review, and you need to make sure that things are ticking and tying, and that everything is coming across properly. So it's very important. Think of it not just as a conduit of very relevant information that's going to be consumed firsthand by admissions committee members, but it's also sending kind of that meta message of how focused on final results, how focused you are on detail, how important it is for you to come across as someone that's precise and prompt. So with that, I'm going to pass it now on a very interesting piece, which are the video essays that we see more and more. They are being incorporated as part of the set of deliverables.
Absolutely. Thank you, Tatiana. That's such an interesting point that you made before. But video essays, yes, you're absolutely right. More and more schools are adding them, whether they're schools in the US, some of the top programs in the US, top schools in Europe. They generally have 1 to 3 questions, 1 minute max to respond. Some schools like INSEAD require that the video be submitted before the application deadline. Some schools provide additional time afterwards, like Kellogg requires the video to be submitted 96 hours afterwards. And then there's this, there are different outliers like Booth. They will invite you to do a video if you're invited for an interview. So all the schools have slightly different formats. They ask different types of questions. So you'll need to get familiar with what are the questions of the schools you're applying to, what are the deadlines. They generally give you 20 to 30 seconds to prepare, and then generally say a minute to do your response. And what are they trying to figure out? They're trying to see, you'll have interviews, but not normally. Most schools don't have interviews with the AdComs. This is their opportunity to see you in action, to see how poised you are, how do you communicate, what are your language skills, among other things. They want to get a degree of what's your likability. They want to imagine you in the class. And one of the ways to start preparing is to prepare a script. Now, in some cases, you'll know the question. In some cases, you won't. But you can, even if you don't, you can prepare responses to traditional questions that they might be asking, whether it's why you're interested in that school, what you're planning to do. Even for INSEAD, that has a lot of different questions, you can figure out what are some of the questions that types of questions they usually ask. If the advantage of doing a script is you can also time yourself, get a feel for how quickly you speak. And then you want to definitely, rehearse with the practice sessions on the platforms like Cura Talent. And that will, you can share those practice sessions with people. afterwards. You can look at them yourself. You can redo them. That's really something you have to do. These are important. They want to see you as your authentic self, and you need to be your authentic self. But there's no better way to be your authentic self than by preparing. Videos can be a little bit challenging because you don't have an audience to play off of. I've worked with senior executives who stand in front of rooms with 5,000 people and speak effortlessly. And when you sit down to film them for a video, they have a hard time. So it's something you just need to get accustomed to. Prepare, speak clearly, enunciate. Remember, they're looking to see what your communication skills are. You don't want to speak too quickly. You want to show down, but you also want to show your enthusiasm for the school, your enthusiasm for whatever the questions are. If they're asking you to introduce yourself in a way that you haven't shown them in your essays, for example, you want to take the time to think about that. And you want to be yourself. That's most important. Be yourself, prepare, and the video essays are one part of your application, right? So that's another reason to also think about when you're looking at all the different elements in your application, what are some of the things that you can add value to your application? And that's it on the video. Perhaps, Tatiana, over to you on one of my favorite topics, proofreading.
Completely. And just as we started our 5 finishing touches, we opened up with a more strategic approach. Embrace end-to-end every single deliverable. Make sure that everything has a natural flow, a coherence, like there's a common thread that you can pull through. Well, that's kind of in the strategic macro approach. Now I'm going to tackle more the tactical, the micro, the proofreading. And so in this proofreading, again, just as I mentioned with the application form, you want to make sure that there are no typos, that there are no spelling mistakes, that there are no grammatical mistakes. Now you're looking more as how things are manifesting, and with that very keen, critical, auditorial eye, you want to make sure that there are no wrinkles left. Another very important element. Are you submitting the right version of the several iterations that probably you had on your multiple essays? And so make sure that you are submitting the final version with no track changes, that you are completely clean and buttoned up. And then for these P's, it's interesting because Melissa alluded to this, like after so many times that you have read something, after so many iterations that you have gone through, you sometimes get fatigue, and sometimes the brain goes on automatic mode and starts kind of reading some things that are not there or skipping things. So maybe recruiting a fresh set of eyes is going to be a smart way to go about this, because then it's going to be easier for that fresh set of eyes to identify anything that's blatantly wrong, or that needs to be modified. So we can't stress enough the importance of proofreading. This is your quality control check. And it is, it's going to be sad to sacrifice amazing content, amazing togetherness of what's been submitted by wrinkles, misses, typos, that are going to sadly just, have an effect on how you are creating that impact with the admissions committee. And so with that, before we jump into questions, we have one final nugget to share with you. And
so first of all, let me just say the proofreading is so important. It really is. It's like I loved your analogy of the stained shirt, especially if you're applying to one of the top business schools. They expect you to provide something that's perfect. They do, especially if it's that important to you. So proofread, and proofread some more, as they say. But Tatiana, let me ask you, is there anything else? What is the last thing that you would suggest in terms of, we've gone through the five tips, how do you, what are the things you need to look at when you're going through in this final lap? Is there anything else that you would add to that?
Yes. And so it's going to be more once you have submitted the application, no, it's out there in the universe, hoping that it's going to render the right result. What can you do? No, what else can you do in the meantime? As suddenly you have been running, and now it's time to sit down and wait. Be very honest with yourself in terms of how well do you interview? Do you need to polish that a little bit, in the meantime, as you're waiting to hear back from the school, either because they're inviting you or not to an interview? But you can practice. And so are there, like the traditional, typical, to be expected questions from almost any schools, and any of these interview engagements, like walk me through your resume. Give me that extra dimension of going from a 2-dimensional resume to listening to what were the decisions behind your transitions, or why did you choose your undergrad, or any of those situations. And then also a very typical to be expected question is, why are you pursuing an MBA? What's your bigger dream? What's your ambition? How is an MBA going to make you get there faster, better, more directly? And why particularly are you interested in this school or that? And so that might be kind of time well spent if you, devote time to scripting those questions, and to also understanding how do you need to prepare? How do you need to feel, at a place of lots of confidence, so that by the time that the interview really materializes, you're ready to be present, you're ready to engage with the interviewer. And just as, it happens to people that interview well and people that are amazing public speakers, oftentimes what goes behind that is tremendous amount of practice, so that they can be absolutely present and poised and understand what the audience needs, understand what the interviewer needs, dance that dance, establish more of a conversation, and have amazing impact. So, that would be my recommendation, Melissa, if there's, anything else to focus on.
Great advice.
How about you? Any
Well, that's a hard act to follow, but I will say, I'll add one thing to that. I guess my last word of advice would be, show the love. It's so important that the school feels like this is really important to you. You love this school. And there are lots of different ways to show your love. I mean, it can be actually, as I mentioned earlier, in the optional essay or elsewhere, to express, to show that you've really done your research. You really know the school. You've researched the classes, the professors. You know why it's going to help you get to the next step in your career. That's a form of love, if you will. It's also by providing an application that is, has been proofed a lot. That's another way to quote unquote show your love. But you want to show your enthusiasm for the school, your enthusiasm for applying, and that is just invaluable in the process, if you will.
Mm-hmm. That's wonderful. Yeah. As you are, you have finalized the entire, the entire set of deliverables, the entire ask of the application. It's very important, with a very fresh, expansive mind, to do an end-to-end review. And in doing these, there are, a few questions that you want to keep in mind, that you want to address as you are consuming your every deliverable in detail. And, the question is there a common thread in the application? Is there a coherent story that is helping us to tie everything together? Are Are you coming across authentically, or does it feel like this is describing someone else? No, it needs to speak true to who you are. It needs to feel genuine.
If I may, Tatiana, one of the things that I know you also advise your candidates on is don't write your essays to please the adcoms. And if it reads like you've written them for them, but not from the heart, that's not a good thing.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, absolutely. And this is where the true introspection, the deep dive into who you are, that's the work that's so important to do, no? Like throughout this process.
Absolutely.
And it needs to come across as such. And the only person that can truly tell if this is ringing true, it's you, no? And so it's very important, no, to make sure that this truly speaks authentically to who you are. Also, have you stayed in touch with your recommenders? You don't want that to be the missing piece. You don't want that to be the weak link. We advise to give earlier deadlines to the recommenders so that we have a little bit of a buffer there. But it's very important not just to throw kind of the ball on their court by giving them the guidance and the brief, but make sure that you stay connected so that they are very aware that strong letters of recommendation on time, well submitted, and representing the candidate well, like that can be, like a make or break situation. Also, check if you have tailored the customizable parts of the application to the school, because of course the who you are, that's not going to change depending on the school that you are applying to, but depending on what school you're applying to, you're going to make reference to certain coursework, faculty members, clubs, labs, anything else that is distinctive and that it's been offered by the school. Again, as you're reviewing the end-to-end, be very critical. Do you have the right content? Is it being distributed properly? Is it being emphasized with the proper intensity? Are you creating the end result of presenting yourself with a bang? Are all the pieces kind of in the right place to have that ultimate result? Are you addressing the questions properly? Are you following the prompts as they are being asked? Are your responses being effectively packaged, elegantly packaged? Are you eliciting emotion, eliciting a response so that your application is memorable? Have you addressed any kind of academic or professional life gaps? No, on the very specifics question that's there in the application form. And finally, are you abiding by the school guidelines? These being the formatting, the word count, any other specific guideline that's been offered by the school. And so, yes, with these, Abhijit, I think we would have covered the content of this slide. So now I think we're ready. We're ready to jump into Q&A. And I see a question from Abby. And I'll pass this one directly to you firsthand, Melissa, and then I'll take a stab at it. And so the question is, does every school look for something different in the essays and video interviews, or is there a standard criteria?
Well, let me start with, the video essays, you call them video interviews, I guess. Yeah, the video essays. They're all of the schools are looking for some fundamentals, which is what are your communication skills? How poised are you? How do you think on your feet? How do you express yourself? They look at people who are confident, as I said, poised, and can express themselves clearly and concisely. Beyond that, some schools, depending on the kinds of questions they ask, are also looking to see if you are what appears to be. Now, they have other elements. This is just, again, one small element among many others, but they want to see, are you a good fit for the school? And that they can determine sometimes from the questions they ask you in terms of the values and what kind of values do you embrace. So if it's a school that cares a lot about the environment and you get a question about the environment, perhaps your level of understanding, that's another way to show your love, that you know what the school is doing in that realm. But I think fundamentally, all of the schools for the videos are looking to see how you express yourself, how poised you are, and how quick you are on your feet.
Mm-hmm. And I would just add, Melissa, that I don't know, Avi, what's the like the key driver of the question, but if it's in terms of monitoring or auditing, that there is consistency in what you're expressing on the written word, and then what you're expressing on the spoken word, on an interview or a video essay. I think to some degree, this common thread, this consistency, like needs to come across. It's not that they're going to be auditing, like specifically, like that you mentioned these. It has to be consistent, of course, but if you choose to offer a different example, to one of the behavioral questions, or that is okay. In reality, what's happening, just as Melissa was making reference to, is let's say they have consumed the application, they really feel prompted to wanting to get to know you more. They feel like, okay, we need to bring this person to life, and we need to see this person either through a video or asynchronously, or through an interview more synchronously. And there they're going to be gauging more, how is the experience of talking to you? Of course, the content needs to be consistent, and the content still needs to remain interesting. But now the next level of, how does it feel to talk and engage with you? That's what's going to be kind of further reviewed and looked for.
Absolutely. Some schools will look to sort of see another dimension of you that they haven't been able to glean in the application, and they will say so. Tell us something that we haven't already seen, across your application. But then they'll be quite clear about it. I mean, again, it's like everything. You want to be consistent, but you want to use each opportunity to show another part of you.
Completely. And so then we have another question. And so it's around throwing some light on the process of the reviewing of the essays. And so the question is, does it make sense to involve family or friends in reviewing essays? What do you think, Melissa?
So what I think about that, it is always really helpful to have other people read your other people, or another person, if you will. I mean, if you're fortunate enough to have somebody in your, that well, who is a native English speaker, who understands the business school sort of environment, that's ideal. If you don't have that, you want to choose carefully who you're going to ask. Because you can ask a lot of people and you can get a lot of people to give you a lot of different opinions, and they may not really know the business school world very well. The English may not be their mother tongue. There are different things you want to take into account. But it is always good to get somebody else to read it, because if you're going through all of this, it's very likely that you're going to miss things that, are only clear to somebody who's looking at it with fresh eyes. I mean, they always say that the secret of the best writers in the world are they have the best editors. So it behooves you to find somebody who can help you in that respect.
Yeah, and that is so true. I just want to add that on one hand, definitely, when it comes to how the message is coming across effectively using language, all of that, it's very important, to follow kind of Melissa's recommendation. I'm going to make a comment more like early stage, as you're brainstorming, as you're figuring out. For instance, I'm going to come up with the essay that I love the most, the What Matters Most to You and Why from Stanford. Sometimes, it's very difficult to, find the What Matters Most statement that rings true to you. And in the process of doing that, I've had several applicants lean on either the mother, the father, the spouse, just to say, okay, this reads like exactly who you are, or this reads like you're not, coming across and you're masquerading a few bits and pieces. So, there's both the element of the content that you can lean on others, but again, just as Melissa was making reference to, you don't want to open these to 1,000 different opinions, because you're going to have 1,000 different opinions. No, you want to make sure that you have your kitchen cabinet of advisors there. And you can lean on some for the impact and the depth of the content. And then, of course, for the form and format. No, that's so relevant. Both elements are super critical.
Absolutely.
And so then we have yes.
Question here that I'm not sure from Anuj. Can you use your application as an opportunity to cover up for some of the deviations presented in assessment tests like GMAT? I'm not sure if you.
Yeah, I'll jump in. So yes, this is the whole spirit, the whole philosophy behind applications. Because if they only wanted to form a class gauged or based on the intellectual capacities that are coming across through a standardized test, then they would just ask for people to do the GMAT or the GRE, and based off their scores, then they would form the class. But in reality, business schools, these particular top tier business schools, they don't want you for 2 years. They want you for life, in the sense that whatever you go do in your career, in the aftermath of graduating from the program, that is going to have a halo effect on the school. Your success is going to be their success. Your mismanagement or your lack of ethics, it's going to be reflected, and it's going to tarnish the school. So they want to put arms around so many aspects of who you are. They want to know what drives you, what ignites you, what motivates you, what has shaped you. What are the role models that have had an impact on you? Where are the pivotal moments, in which you have grown? It has been hard, but you have grown. You have manifested who you are. What are your dreams? What's your ambition? Where are you wanting to go and head? They want all of that. They want to know what's your leadership potential. Best predictor to that is, how have you manifested that leadership potential through certain leadership behaviors in the past? So, of course, if you have, like, I'm going to go with the basics of a higher GMAT with a very strong quantitative percentile, of course, that's, wonderful to have. But if you don't have it, you definitely can present yourself through the perspective of the recommenders. You can speak true to your emotional intelligence. You can speak true to your sense of awareness. You can share the multiple ways in which you have had impact in your community, in the immediate sphere in which you operate. You can indicate, like how you have always gone for excellence through awards. I mean, there's so many aspects, and that's why they're giving you so much real estate to elaborate effectively on who you are. So yes, Anush, I think there's definitely runway to offset. And in reality, again, in the words of Kristen Moss from Stanford, former head of admissions, they're not looking for reasons to reject you. They're looking for reasons to accept you.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And so, yeah, that would be my response to that. Anything, Melissa, that comes to mind?
No, you said it perfectly well.
Absolutely. Fantastic. So I'm not seeing any other questions coming through. There's one question there. It says, with the increasing unemployment rate and weak economic prospects, do we expect more competitive application season this year? And I'll let you jump on that first, Melissa.
Oh, Well, there is sometimes a cyclical, when the economy goes down, people tend to say this is a good time to to come to business school. I do not have a crystal ball. I'm hoping that the increasing unemployment for all will not last. But there is a truth to when the economy is not doing well and unemployment is more difficult, that there are more applications for business school and it does become more competitive. Whether or not the unemployment that we're just, that everybody's talking about is really sort of the unemployed of the people that are applying for business school, that is also another matter.
Yeah. And I would just add that for good or bad, getting into any of the top business schools, it's kind of a scarce resource. No, it's not that the supply is going to be any bigger or it's going to expand. And so all things considered, we're already talking about thousands of applicants at any point in time. So even if that drops, I think the level of competitiveness is still going to be quite prevalent.
Yeah, that's true. I see there's one other question from Abby, which is a question we get often, which is, is it harder to get in for round two than round one? Or do they differ? So, most people do say that, it's a bit easier in round one. It's very debatable, to be quite honest. A lot of schools, they know they've got the round two. They accept a certain part of the class for round one, but they've really kept it very open for round two. The most important thing is to submit an application that is strong. If you're questioning, if you're rushed to get your application done for round one, then it is hands down, no question, wait. Take the time, do it properly, apply with a strong application for round two. Now, when schools have 3 rounds, it certainly is more difficult for round three. That's true. But between round one and round two, it's not that big of a difference, I don't think, from everything I've heard from admissions directors. And again, it's much better. I tell candidates all the time, if they're rushing to get round one, if the application isn't strong enough, if it's not ready, then they should not apply. They should wait.
Absolutely. Yeah, that completely support that. Fantastic. So,
oh yeah, so the Canadian schools have 4 rounds. So does schools like Abby, so like INSEAD. Some of the, one of the schools that's a global school, but that's based in France and Singapore, has 4 rounds too. And the 4th round is, to be avoided, if you can. Also, if you're considering, if you're going to apply for a scholarship, it's best not to apply in that final round, the 4th round. But the difference between 1 and 2 is nothing, especially when there are 4.
Excellent. Okay, so with that, I think we want to leave you with, just this information about Fortuna admissions. And basically, and if you don't know, Fortuna is a dream team of former admissions directors. These are gatekeepers to the top business schools. We're talking about the usual suspects, Harvard, Stanford, Wharton, INSEAD, LBS, and so on. We provide strategic guidance throughout your application with unbiased feedback and very credible application advice. And if you want to talk to us, if you want to engage with us with no strings attached, if you just want to touch base, have a conversation, please sign up for a free consultation. And Abhijit, if we can go to the next slide, definitely sign up for the consultation, and don't forget to also check out all the other amazing video content, webinars like this one, but on almost any topic that you can think of related to business school application. You can just consume it at your own pace, just be prompted by it. And if you're interested, definitely, please do reach out. We would love to talk to you.
Absolutely.
And with that, thank you so much, Melissa.
Thank you, Tatiana. This has been great.
Thank you. And thank you, everybody, for tuning in. And we'll see you again soon. Bye.